Cruising will finally return to Australian shores after more than 2 years of bans. P&O Cruises Australia will set sail on May 31st with Princess Cruises on June 16th. Each cruise line has announced their health protocols and requirements, so let's dive in and see what's what. I'm Adrian, the Cruise and Travel Guy. As always, thank you for subscribing to my channel, and if you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. With the resumption of local cruising only weeks away, avid cruise fans have been eagerly awaiting cruising health protocols and requirements, and they're finally here. Both cruise lines will require all guests over the age of 12 to be fully vaccinated. For the purpose of cruising, fully vaccinated means that a person has had both a first and second dose of an approved vaccine. At this stage, booster shots are not required, but they are recommended. Both doses have to be administered at least 14 days prior to departure. Guests that are unable to be vaccinated due to health reasons, as well as guests under the age of 12, don't need to be vaccinated. However, at minimum, 95% of the passengers on board the cruise ship must be vaccinated. So that means that if you can't be vaccinated or aren't vaccinated, you would need to register that information with the cruise line at the time of booking to make sure that the number of guests on board that aren't vaccinated doesn't exceed 5%. This is on a first come, first served basis, so people can miss out. In the case of both cruise lines, proof of vaccination is required in order to board. Princess will require that each guest completes their health declaration using the Princess Medallion app, confirming that they are fully vaccinated. At the terminal, proof of vaccination will be required to be shown at check-in. For domestic voyages, this can be your digital vaccination certificate. For international voyages, this will need to be an Australian International Vaccination Certificate, which you can generate online through the Medicare app. A COVID test will need to be taken before departure with obviously a negative test result. In the case of both cruise lines, a self-administered rapid antigen test taken within 24 hours of departure will be sufficient. Alternatively, a guest can choose to do a PCR test within 72 hours of departure. Princess Cruises will depend on its Medallion app, with all guests required to complete, as part of the check-in process, confirmation that they have had a negative COVID test. Guests sailing with Princess that have organised for a vaccination exemption will need to show the results of a PCR test taken within 72 hours before departure at the time of check-in. P&O will be utilising the services of a third-party app called Verifly. The app will need to be downloaded prior to departure, and each adult guest will need to complete a declaration as part of the check-in process. Guests will need to declare that they have received a negative test result, as well as provide proof of vaccination. Once the documents have been verified in the app, it will generate a green tick which will need to be shown along with your P&O boarding pass at check-in. Guests sailing with P&O that have organised for a vaccination exemption will not be required to use the Verifly app, and they will instead present the negative PCR test result at the time of check-in. They will also need to complete their pre-cruise health declaration online at the Cruise Control P&O website. Unlike many ports within the US, there will be no testing available within the terminal itself. All testing will need to be undertaken by the guests themselves prior to departure as required. The big question, of course, or one of them, is what happens if you test positive to COVID before the cruise? In the case of both cruise lines, anyone who tests positive, including family members and close contacts traveling together, will not be permitted to board. In the case of Princess, anyone unable to travel due to a positive test or being a close relative of the positive test will be entitled to a 100% future cruise credit. Additionally, change fees and reasonable expenses related to shoreside medical care for COVID-19, shoreside quarantine, and travel home for you and your immediate travel party will be covered by Princess if it isn't reimbursable from your travel insurance policy. P&O haven't exactly covered this information in the same level of detail. In fact, their policy indicates that if you test positive in the 10 days prior to departure, you and any other guests from the same household won't be permitted to travel. There is no specific mention of a refund or future cruise credit being offered in this instance, though I do believe that a future cruise credit will be offered, as it is with Princess. No other information about ancillary costs is available on their website. Both cruise lines will allow guests to book and travel on back-to-back cruises. Between voyages, guests will need to disembark the ship and they'll receive a complimentary COVID-19 test. In the event that a guest tests positive at this stage, On both cruise lines, they will be offered a future cruise credit to the value of the cruise fare paid for that second voyage. Once on board, each cruise line will require all guests over the age of 12 to wear a mask indoors when physical distancing can't be observed, as well as when on board the ship's tenders. Guests can, of course, eat or drink without wearing a mask and will be able to take their mask off once in their stateroom. In the event that a guest becomes sick and tests positive for COVID-19 whilst on board, but doesn't require shoreside medical care, Princess Cruises protocols state that that guest will be isolated, most likely in a different cabin. If you or a family member, traveling companion, or other close contact tests positive during the cruise and is required to isolate, you will be entitled to a 100% future cruise credit, prorated for missed cruise days, including time spent in shipboard isolation. More in-depth information can be read on each cruise line's website, and I've included links in the description below so you can go and have a look for yourself. I think on the whole that the protocols presented by both cruise lines are generally as expected. There aren't really any surprises. I did think that there might have been a requirement to have a supervised rapid antigen test before boarding, but it looks like both cruise lines will be relying on the health declarations of each individual guest instead. Compared to P&O, Princess have provided more detail and information about certain circumstances, such as what might happen if someone contracts the illness on board and is required to isolate, and even the potential for trip reimbursement. I would say this is in part due to the fact that Princess have now been operating for quite a while, whereas P&O will just be embarking on their first trip on the 31st of May. I do hope that P&O will clarify some of these other issues in greater detail in the coming weeks. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the protocols and requirements. Was there anything that surprised you? If you are interested in booking a cruise, you can head to my website, thecruiseandtravelguy.com.au, and if you haven't done so already, you can give me a follow on Facebook and Instagram at The Cruise and Travel Guy. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. With the resumption of local cruising only weeks away, avid cruise fans have been eagerly awaiting the cruise line's health and at the terminal, proof of vaccination will require to be a COVID test will be needed to taken. Princess Cruises will rule online at the cruise control site on the P&O website.